A little follow-up video, I think, on some of the subjects brought up in Stickam, sort of, kind of. Just related also to just other shit I saw on the YouTubes. Excuse me. Anyway, yeah, the dentist guy was in there last night, and I was a little bit harsh with him because he was doing the, oh, there's some kind of hope for the human race, we can do something, blah, 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 blah. And he was sort of making the argument, too, that this life thing was inevitable, and you can't just get out of this, to bail out. And that somehow you have an obligation not to bail out, because there might be something. Well, I think I sort of disposed of that by using the example that even with a big giant brain, you're not going to fix tic-tac-toe. It's tic-tac-toe. It's a simple game. It can only be played by organisms willing to be owned and controlled by the kind of simplistic and self-serving almost ambitions of a reproducing DNA molecule. So anyway, in the context, this is in the context of there's some snarky, I don't know, one of these trolley guys posted some video as a response to one of my videos that was just a clip of that whatever Tyson guy, just doing his spiel on how it would be the height of arrogance not to think there was life in the universe. And yeah, there is an alternative video of his called Stupid Design, where he basically explains why there aren't UFOs, and does that by explaining just how unlikely life is. So it's just a complete contradiction of his own propaganda. I mean, if you're going to argue that there's no UFOs, and argue that it's because life is improbable, you just can't have it both ways. If life is abundant in the universe, you'd have to assume that there are parts of the universe much older than the parts we're in, and that they would have produced this intelligence and this sentience thing already and all that crap, and they would be leaving in the universe some signature of their development, their advancement, that we would hear. They would have blown something up in some sort of manner that would leave an echo we could hear, that kind of thing. And I just think that's, sensible as a logical conclusion. And the fact that that evidence doesn't exist, and the fact that on this earth the evidence of competing life existing doesn't exist, does indicate that this is not common chemistry. So anyway, I don't know if I really want to argue Drake, because I've already done that. I've been there, done that. I don't really want to argue just contradiction, but it's just that it's hard to look at life this, without there's just nothing redeeming in this conversation, and I'll concede that. I mean, it's all just kind of, dismal. And I guess that sort of relates to Inspired I Am, who's sort of seeking some sort of alternative answer than let's just give up. Or since we're already here, let's find some brilliant thing to do with our time. And, I'm all for that. But I guess the most brilliant thing we could do is do our exit as gracefully and as with little conflict and imposition and harshness as possible. I mean, to a good, graceful exit is maybe the highest ambition. Live out our lives as comfortably as possible, in this effort to achieve this, end of, a rat race that no rats are going to win in realistic, practical reality. That the winners are always going to cost too much. So I guess that sort of relates to this idea that, they're always going to try to grab that and turn it into some sort of hopeful future where Well, if we can do this, just like I would argue, that if you can get that far advanced where human beings are nice to each other, you just take that one little step forward and just give up on the game because your brain is high enough. You've superseded your basic emotional desire, and so now you can do the rational thing. And obviously we can get the human race free of, purely ignorant religion, and get them to understand what psychology is and what biology is, and what they're working with in terms of as sensitive organisms, that we are desire machines, need machines essentially. So there's just such a subtle line there between having the knowledge to appreciate the value of sentience and getting the most potential out of our intelligence, and the realization that accomplishing that is actually fatal. I mean, it just doesn't sound good. It just doesn't feel right. The accomplishment shouldn't be, oh, you died. It's hard to see victory in death. But you have to see it in that bigger, broader way to understand the victory. That the victory is over ignorance and false notions of reality. The victory is conquering the idea of perpetuating systems that are leaking gas, so to speak, preventing some sort of horrible waste from taking place, some sort of holocaust of wasted suffering that doesn't need to be endured. And understanding it in that context, you can understand how it would be a huge victory if we could prevent a world war worth of suffering. I mean, just think of the, millions of humans being brutally and harshly deprivated and harmed and suffering. To be able to be part of preventing something like that could be very rewarding and be a very positive, something to feel positive about, rather than converting it into this negative of, oh, but, we lost because, human has to go and sentient life we can't make it work, and so we failed. I'm just going to argue there is this giant grace, this giant benefit in realistically accepting that truth, that's the only way to win, is to surrender at the right time in the war. I guess you could analogize it that way, that the greatest general is the general who sees the future before it happens, knows what the outcome is going to be, and saves the harm to as many of his troops as possible by accepting that inevitability and accepting his own defeat. And in doing that, he becomes a magnificent hero in being able to swallow that hard pill, because the great value or the great good is in the fact that he didn't allow all this extra wasted suffering to be piled on to the effort, to be part of the story. Sorry, gas and such. Yeah, still kind of uncomfortable and such. Sorry. So this is all a head game emotionally, but emotionally, if you need it you can find the truth in it. The value is there. You just have to you have to just see it and not be blindsided by the headline that is, human goes anti-natalism, declares defeat. And just take the word defeat out of the vocabulary and just sort of understand that we're not responsible for the defeat. The defeat was built into the structure. We didn't fail. Nature failed us. We were failed by a universe that didn't have any intelligent design. We were failed by the process, the opportunity, the bad opportunity that knocked. And so it's not like you just have to depersonalize your ego from those conventional notions of victory and failure, and understand that there is this higher ambition, which is not to waste suffering. And it will, in practical fact, be a waste of suffering if we attempt to perpetuate the human, whatever you want to call it, the grinder, the machinery, the canard, the lie of constructive purpose. The mechanism of sentience is a tornado. It's a brilliant force taken out of any context. Looked at for what it is, you can say, holy shit, that's fucking brilliant. Look at the power. It's almost beautiful. But you can't put it in any kind of real context, because in a real context, it will just be slice them and dice them, make a mess, fucktarded. It won't produce anything of value. It will, in just a spectacular way, make a huge fucking mess. And unfortunately, sentience is a kind of tornado that takes place, or can take place, in this material universe. It takes special circumstances, takes a special environment, but once you have it, and it's there, that's what it is. And, I mean, quite logically, you could understand that no tornado could possibly be worth its weight. None could be worth letting loose. I mean, unless you could control it, I guess, and throw it at an enemy. So it would only be a highly contrived circumstance where it would ever be useful or functional. And that's what the circumstance we're stuck in. The only way we are useful is in cleaning up the threat that we present. We create the threat to the sentient beings. Our actions push the wrong way, move the wrong way. We're the one that creates the opportunity for this disaster. So it's just better not to play with it. This isn't a toy you can play with. This isn't a device you can play with. It has no useful function. It's not a lawnmower. It's not a blender. But it's just this whacking device that just whacks shit. And that's what sentience does. It creates need that isn't needed. And that just has nothing but negative potential. And only if you have some ideal circumstance, some perfect circumstance, can you put it to any useful use. Only if there is already a mess in place, a bigger mess, can the mess maker actually be a mess cleaner. So we are completely dependent in terms of being productive on there being bleeding kids or horrific harm taking place in front of us for us to intervene and break up the fight or stop the war or stop the disaster. That's the only way we can have any constructive use. Otherwise, we're just a consuming need machine that produces more, inevitably, consciously experiences this thing called negative potential, and realizes a negative potential. And the positives are just synthetic. They are phenomenon created by a psychology that first creates a subtle deprivation and creates the illusion of pleasure and satisfaction by merely removing the mechanism of harm or deprivation. It's built into us. We're just pain machines, and we don't realize that when we're relieved of the negative qualities is when we experience the positive experience. The positive experience is actually the neutral, and it appears like a real positive only because of the negative state we were put in to appreciate it. So anyway, this is the context though, and this is why it's a difficult conversation, because people have to understand it's just a chemical molecule reproducing, and that we're still made of that. That's still the core of what we're doing. It's just playing a consumption and reproduction game, and with these added components of cannibalizing parts off of each other, and which leads to exploitation also, and this driver of an addiction mechanism, which is actually remove something, so the organism will chase what you removed. So anyway, enough of the video and such. Until next time, back to the old routine and such.